absolutely huge. This will be the fourth, either the fourth or fifth major indictment, the fourth major indictment. We have James Comey, John Bolton, Letitia James, and now we have John Brennan referred to the Department of Justice for criminal prosecution just a couple of hours ago. Fox News, USA Today, Daily Beast, Newsweek. Obama CIA Director John Brennan referred to DOJ for prosecution. USA Today, House Republicans refer Obama CIA Director John Brennan for criminal prosecution. Daily Beast, Trump's revenge tour continues with another nemesis targeted. Fox News, House Judiciary Committee refers former CIA Director John Brennan to Justice Department for prosecution. That is basically an indictment. Essentially, the indictment is imminent, already written. House Judiciary Committee refers John Brennan for criminal prosecution. The House Judiciary Committee referred CIA Director John Brennan to the Justice Department for criminal prosecution that he knowingly made false statements to Congress about his role in the Russia collusion hoax. False statements, in addition to a whole bunch of other things. Making false statements to Congress is a crime, according to Jim Jordan. It is a crime that undermines the integrity of the committee's constitutional duty to conduct oversight. Hit subscribe to my super chat. Thank you so much. Your super chat support is greatly appreciated. It's happening, ladies and gentlemen. It is happening. Let's get started. You can hear Jim Jordan right here, and we will get to the specific lies in a second. This is huge.
Did John Brennan lie to Congress? Let me just read a couple things actually before you answer that. 2 years ago, we had Mr. Brennan in for an interview, and I asked him, how'd you learn about the dossier in December of 2016? Mr. Brennan replied, I received a copy of it from the FBI, and the CIA was very much opposed to having any reference or inclusion of the Steele dossier in the intelligence community assessment. That's what John Brennan told the United States Congress. 7 weeks ago, the Director of National Intelligence told us this. John Brennan lied and denied using the dossier in the intelligence community assessment because he knew it was discredited. CIA officer told the House Intelligence Committee Brennan refused to remove it, and when confronted with the dossier's main flaws, he responded, yes, but doesn't it ring true? John Brennan lied to us?
Mr. Chairman, I won't stylize the evidence. What I will say is that the intelligence community assessment, those that created it and any individual involved with it, is an ongoing investigation.
There's an investigation into what took place in December and January of December 2016, January 2017, when this whole thing started, this grand conspiracy. That is being investigated, is that right?
That has been publicly announced by the department.
That's been announced by the department. Did Chris Wray hide documents from this committee?
You would know better than me, sir.
Well, I think you told us like 700 pieces of information you've given this committee since you've been the director relative to just one incident, the Catholic memorandum from the Richmond field office.
I can give you the comparison, sir. Yeah. The Catholic memo, I believe we turned over 750 documents. In Mr. Ray's tenure, I believe they turned over 19 pages.
19 pages. You've given us 700. Why would Chris Wray hide information from this committee? You want to hazard a guess?
I'm sorry?
Hazard a guess why he would do that?
I don't know, sir.
I think maybe it was because FBI was spying on a priest, trying to get him to break the priest penitent confidence that exists. You think maybe that was the reason?
You'd have to ask him, sir.
Yeah, we'd love to do that. I want to read a few names here.
So Jim Jordan, just a couple of months ago, is in Congress asking Kash Patel, did Brennan lie? It's a rhetorical question. Kash Patel knows very well, but he has to explain, or he has to show the world that, you know, he's trying to be impartial. But right here, you can see Brennan is mentioned 12 times, and right here in the ODNI report, John Brennan lied and denied using the dossier in the ICA because he knew it was discredited, politically motivated, manufactured document. He told CIA officials to use it anyway. He refused to remove it. And then he's mentioned 12 different times in Tulsi Gabbard's declassified Director of National Intelligence information. Brennan mischaracterized intelligence, misled lawmakers, lied, overruled CIA officers. So he lied throughout the whole thing. And we will get to the greatest lie of all time in a second. But let's continue here. This is Devin Nunes years back talking about Durham and the Durham probe, which will be at the center of all of this because he lied within the statute of limitations, John Brennan. This is in addition to the conspiracy statutes. So he testified during the Durham probe. Check this out.
Well, he's hardly in the clear, and the good thing is that you don't see Durham, who's a professional prosecutor. We have real grown-ups now that are running this investigation, so I don't think Brennan's in the clear at all. With that said, we need to know what Brennan knew and when he knew it. And the key question is he's made some pretty clear comments that he knew about Russians that were talking to the Trump people. Well, it appears now that we've pulled all of this back and all the evidence has been laid on the table. The only Trump people that we know that were talking to the Russians were Carter Page, who he wasn't actually talking to Russians. He took a trip to Moscow. And when we all know how that went, Carter Page was framed. And that was produced by the Democratic National Committee, that information. So did Brennan have this information? If so, who gave it to him? Did the Democrat National Committee give it to him? Did the Hillary Clinton campaign give it to him? But clearly he should have known that this would not have been real intelligence that should have been used to target a political campaign. And I think that's
so the issue
from our vantage point, Republicans, I mean, that's what we want to know from him.
The issue is whether John Brennan misled House Intelligence and other committees in Congress, right? Is that it?
Well,
and the answer is yes. You will hear likely what his testimony was when he had the televised testimony to Congress in a second. But the perjury issue is there. That's in addition to the conspiracy statutes they're going to level against everyone, Hillary Clinton included. And also the false statements applies to Hillary Clinton, John Brennan for the Durham probe interviews and testimony, closed-door Durham probe testimony 2 years ago in 2023. We'll get to that in a second as well, but I will show you exactly why Brennan and Clinton and others are going to be indicted and
under what authority would Brennan, who is supposed to be the top of the CIA, the top of our intelligence services, they have tried and true methods to actually look and gather intelligence that go through many checks and triple checks, all the way through, so that by the time you get something, it's believable, So he would have to know if he's peddling this is just pure nonsense, and it's not something that a CIA director should be engaged in.
Let's move on to this. The problem for Brennan, James Comey, and Andrew McCabe and the Obama administration is this. Why did the FBI aggressively lobby and push the CIA to include the discredited, debunked opposition anti-Trump research, that being the Steele dossier, to include it in the intelligence community assessment, the powerful assessment about national security? This is about Russian meddling in the election. Did they do it to give that Steele dossier more gravitas, more stature, more credibility, even though they knew it was flawed, even though the CIA told the FBI it was internet rumor, even though Steele's own sources said it's baseless gossip? Did they do that, stick it in the ICA in order to get more wiretaps on FISA wiretaps on the Trump team?
And here is why. Right here, ladies and gentlemen. A Politico article. They always wanted Trump. Inside Team Clinton's year-long struggle to find a strategy against the opponent they were most eager to face. This is a November 7th, 2016 article talking about how Democrats wanted Donald Trump. They got exactly what they wanted, and they lost. Okay? And they lost. Inside Clinton's year-long struggle to find a strategy against the opponent they were most eager to face. They always wanted Trump. And then you have the WikiLeaks emails. Quote, this is what they wrote. We need to be elevating the Pied Piper candidates so they are leaders of the pack and tell the press to take them seriously. Clinton and the Democratic Party, this is an ABC News article, establishment repeatedly stressed Trump's lack of political experience as a knock against him during the general election campaign, but nationwide, the electorate valued the ability to bring change. Okay, so they wanted the memo named Trump, Ted Cruz, and Dr. Ben Carson as preferred opponents in the general election. They literally wanted Trump. And oh, what's this? Putin wanted Obama in 2008. Russian Prime Minister suggests administration change will help negotiations between Moscow and Washington. This is a Thursday, December 4th, 2008 article. Diplomatic relations between Moscow and Washington should improve once Barack Obama takes office, Vladimir Putin today suggested. I don't remember any Steele dossier or any attempt by the Russians to get President Obama into the Oval Office. But not only did they want Trump, the campaign, the DNC emails, the Clinton campaign emails showed they wanted Trump, but Putin in 2008 wanted President Obama. And by the way, Hillary had a dossier on Obama in 2008. That's in there's a Newsweek article that we talked about on this channel. But hit subscribe if you're new to my super chat. Thank you. So it's all unraveling, ladies and gentlemen. It's all unraveling.
Well, I think what they did, I think you're right over the target. So what we believe today is the reason that was put in to this intelligence community assessment, just so your viewers understand, I call that Obama's dossier. Obama ordered that after Donald Trump won the election in 2016. And within weeks, they had decided, they put out a phony report, all our intelligence agencies did, that said that the Russians were trying to help Trump. In reality, what do we find out? The Russians were doing what they always try to do, which is sow discord. And in fact, Russia, like most other countries, like anybody, nobody ever thought that Donald Trump had a shot to win. So
I was saying he was going to win in my writing on my channel, and I was telling the world. This is when I was still completely delusional politically on the left. And I was the biggest Bernie Sanders booster on the internet, according to the Huffington Post, and the unofficial scribe of Sanders' most hardcore voters, according to the Washington Post. Thank God, you can read my writing on hagoodman.com. Thank God I saw the light and realized that Bernie Sanders was a part of creating Cold War hysteria. Red Scare McCarthy are a myth. They cheated him. They had a cybersecurity scandal that was covered up by Comey, only to be created only to resurface with the Comey letter. That's what actually sunk Clinton's campaign. Because we're going to get back to the WikiLeaks email. They wanted President Trump, then they said the Russians did. It was actually the Democrats that did. Then they changed their tune. But let's continue.
The fact that dossier got put into the intelligence community assessment, knowing what they knew, that this was Democratic paid garbage, and they hid that from Congress, it was clear what they were trying to do. They were playing catch up on an October surprise that went wrong when they found out Carter Page wasn't talking to any Russians. They were way out over their skis, and so they were trying to play catch up. And ultimately, as we all know, this is the same time, even though General Flynn had been totally exonerated by the FBI agents investigating him, they kept that open. And so the more this goes on, I think it's pretty clear that Brennan and Obama, they were all involved. The key is who gave the order? Who gave the order to participate in this corruption? So
they will all blame President Obama. They will all blame President Obama. The issue, ladies and gentlemen, is that President Obama is not going to be indicted. There's a 0 chance. Hillary Clinton will. John Brennan is about to. Well, he's essentially already indicted. But this is what he almost certainly told John Brennan, which leads to the indictment. Check this out. Hit subscribe if you're new to the channel. And share this. This is huge.
Trying to involve themselves in our election. Did you ever find any evidence, as the ranking member spoke of collusion while you were the director, did you find direct evidence of collusion between the Trump campaign and Putin in Moscow while you were there?
Mr. Rooney, I never was an FBI agent. I never was a prosecutor, so I really don't do evidence. I do intelligence throughout the course of my career.
I don't do evidence, I do intelligence. So what is he saying here? He's saying that evidence need not correlate to intelligence? That intelligence is somehow different from evidence? Intelligence should correlate directly to evidence, otherwise it's worthless. Otherwise, you get a Steele dossier purchased by Hillary Clinton because, oh, by the way, they always wanted Trump. This is a Politico article right here in 2016. The opponent they were most eager to face. And then ABC News. The WikiLeaks, among the hacked documents from the Democratic organizations released by WikiLeaks was a memo, assistant, sent to chairman, the memo named Trump, Senator Ted Cruz, and Dr. Ben Carson as preferred opponents in the general election. Are you trying to say that Clinton's own campaign were in cahoots with the Russians? The whole thing was fabricated. The whole thing was fabricated. That's why the indictments that you see with Comey and Brennan and Bolton, this is nothing. These are only placeholder indictments. We need to be elevating the Pied Piper candidates. They literally wanted to elevate Trump. They wanted President Trump. And when they lost, they then had to, as always, about face, turn 180 degrees and then claim that the Russians wanted Trump. So he doesn't do evidence. And his intelligence was completely fabricated, and almost certainly he told the Durham probe this. That's why he's getting indicted. John Durham deserves the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
As an intelligence professional, what we try to do is to make sure that we provide all relevant information to the Bureau if there is an investigation underway that they are looking into criminal activity. As I mentioned in my opening statement, I was convinced in the summer that the Russians were trying to interfere in the election. And they were very aggressive. It was a multifaceted effort. And I wanted to make sure that we were able to expose as much of that as possible.
But was there intelligence that said that the Trump campaign was colluding with Moscow during their campaign?
There was intelligence that the Russian intelligence services were actively involved in this effort. And having been involved in many counterintelligence cases in the past, I know what the Russians try to do. They try to suborn individuals. And they try to get individuals, including U.S. persons, to act on their behalf either wittingly or unwittingly. And I was worried by a number of the contacts that the Russians had with U.S. persons. And so therefore, by the time I left office on January 20th, I had unresolved questions in my mind as to whether or not the Russians had been successful in getting U.S. persons involved in the campaign or not to work on their behalf, again, either in a witting or unwitting fashion. And so, therefore, I felt as though the FBI investigation was certainly well-founded and needed to look into those issues.
This is, of course, nonsense. We know that Brennan, right here, is front and center lying. Brennan lied and denied using the dossier. This is, of course, a press release from the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. Brennan is mentioned 12 different times. CIA, Brennan, and the IC mischaracterized intelligence. Brennan and the IC misled lawmakers. Okay, December 9, 2016. That's when it all really took shape. Although it started, the conspiracy started before that, and later that day, Brennan ordered the inclusion of substandard reporting. Brennan overruled CIA officers. Contradicting public claims, Brennan, that the dossier was not in any way incorporated. The dossier was referenced in the ICA main body text. Literally, Clinton's dossier was referenced in the United States intelligence assessment. I mean, you couldn't even imagine something so outlandish. Brennan lied and denied using the dossier. Brennan refused to remove it. High confidence. Stated in a memo. There is strong consensus. There was never strong consensus. The NSA wouldn't follow suit. The NSA disagreed and said, well, we'll just give moderate, not high confidence. Okay? But this, ladies and gentlemen, right here, who is Jim Jordan talking to? The current Federal Bureau of Investigation director. Where is he during this testimony? Check this out.
When you talk about, and I'm running out of time, but hopefully I'll be able to circle back. Can you describe their capabilities beyond just propaganda and actual infiltrating, whether or not there was, you had intelligence to infiltrate the campaign with capabilities beyond just propaganda and beyond just reaching out or trying to influence the news or the campaign? And how long have we known about these type of capabilities?
There's a lot of intelligence that's been built up over the years about Russia's MO in terms of trying to gain influence in Western democracies. How they've been able to use individuals, they've been able to use politicians, political parties, they've been able to use elements within the media to try to make sure that their objectives are realized. And so, again, knowing what the Russian MO is and has been, including in elections in Europe, I certainly was concerned that they were practicing the same types of activities here in the United States. And that's why, as I said, we set up a group in late July that included the FBI and NSA. I wanted to make sure that every information and bit of intelligence that we had was shared with the Bureau so that they could take it. It was well beyond my mandate as director of CIA to follow on any of those leads that involved U.S. persons.
But that was complete nonsense. He knew that the Clinton campaign wanted President Trump. They actually wanted to elevate Trump. They actually thought that Trump, Ted Cruz, and Ben Carson were preferred candidates. That's why there was the Politico article also. Not only the WikiLeaks email, they wanted President Trump. They were most eager to face the opponent they were most eager to face. How could Russia and the Clinton campaign both want Trump? Oh, that's right. The whole thing was fabricated. And the CIA and FBI at that point knew all of this. There was no evidence pointing to Putin wanting Trump, because that evidence would also point to Clinton wanting Trump. So they just fabricated everything. Obviously, people could not accept losing. You had 8 years of liberal Democrats stating, okay, we control the future of this country now. And when President Obama left, Clinton was supposed to be the third Obama term. Didn't work out. By the way, I think President Obama is helping President Trump, number one, to circumvent any criminal liability, because he does face some criminal exposure. He was president when this all started. And two, he gets to take over the Democratic Party. Clinton will be indicted, but she'll still run for president. So, and pretty much everything that I've been saying is taking place, but let's continue.
but I made sure that anything that was involving U.S. persons, including anything involving the individuals involved in the Trump campaign, was shared with the Bureau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That was time expired. Mr. Schiff, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. They did so without.
These continue to be.
Testify that you had a conversation.
So you have Kash Patel right here today, 2025, as the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Where was Kash Patel in 2017? Where was he?
Conversation in August of 2016 with your Russian counterpart. You testified that you briefed at least 8 members of
the FBI director, future FBI director, was sitting behind Trey Gowdy during this interaction with Brennan, where he continues to lie.
Congress throughout the pendency of your investigation. When you learned of Russian efforts, and we'll get to that in a minute because my understanding from your unclassed report is Russia has historically attempted to interfere with our electoral process, and they did so without coordination, collusion, or conspiring with any of the candidates. So they have a history of doing it. We'll lay that aside for a minute. 2016 electoral process. When you learned of Russian efforts, did you have evidence of a connection between the Trump campaign and Russian state actors?
As I said, Mr. Gowdy, I don't do evidence. And we were uncovering information and intelligence about interactions and contacts between.
Perjury. He can't simply say, oh, I don't do evidence, I do intelligence, some nebulous, obscure, ambiguous, vague, broad, fabricated thing that I could just utilize to circumvent future perjury traps. Intelligence is supposed to directly correlate to evidence in this case. He literally sent the dossier to the FBI. He knew who purchased it. He knew Clinton and the DNC purchased the dossier. And the Democrats filtered through, Clinton filtered through, and her team and the Democratic Party purchased nonsense, fabricated lies into the United States government. That's what took place. And he's misleading Congress here. He's making false statements.
U.S. persons and the Russians. And as we came upon that, we would share it with the Bureau.
I appreciate that you don't do evidence, Director Brennan. Unfortunately, that's what I do. That's the word we use. You use the word assessment. You use the word tradecraft. I use the word evidence. And the good news for me is lots of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle use the word evidence too. One of my colleagues said there is more than circumstantial evidence of collusion between the Russians and the Trump campaign. Now, there are only 2 types of evidence. There's circumstantial and direct. So if it's more than circumstantial, by necessity, it has to be direct. Those aren't my words. Those are the words of one of my colleagues on the other side of this very committee. Another Democrat colleague on the other side of this committee also used the word evidence, that he has seen evidence of collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians. And yet a third California Democrat said she had seen no evidence of collusion. So that's 3 different members of Congress from the same state using the same word, which is evidence. And that's the word that my fellow citizens understand, evidence. Assessment is your vernacular. Tradecraft is your vernacular. You and I both know what the word evidence means. And we're not getting into whether or not you corroborated, contradicted, examined, cross-examined. We're not getting into how you tested and probed the reliability of that evidence. It's a really simple question. Did evidence exist of collusion, coordination, conspiracy between the Trump campaign and Russian state actors at the time you learned of 2016 efforts?
I encountered and am aware of information and intelligence that revealed contacts and interactions between Russian officials and U.S. persons involved in the Trump campaign that I was concerned about because of known.
When he went like that, he cleared his throat right there. He's just trying to create a lie. So right here.
Of information and intelligence that revealed contacts and interactions between Russian officials and U.S. persons involved in the Trump campaign that I was concerned about because of known Russian efforts to suborn such individuals. And it raised questions in my mind, again, whether or not the Russians were able to gain the cooperation of those individuals. I don't know whether or not such collusion, that's your term, such collusion existed.
Yes, he did know. He was director of the CIA. They have more at their disposal to find out if collusion or any other type of activity took place than even the FBI. And he did know. He knew there was no collusion, and then he still tries to say, well, that's your term. What they did was thrust the country into a new Cold War, into a McCarthy-era Red Scare zeitgeist that people still believe. And even after the Mueller probe, well, there was contacts. Well, there was contacts during Uranium One. There was even a money trail. There was a whistleblower too. And still no. Could you imagine if 20% of U.S. uranium capacity was given to Russia under President Trump's administration? I mean, it would be like, it's unbelievable. Can you imagine if the Russians invaded under Trump's administration the way they did under Biden? Or they took territory the way they did under President Obama in the Crimea? But let's continue.
I don't know, but I know that there was a sufficient basis of information and intelligence that required further investigation by the Bureau to determine whether or not U.S. persons were actively conspiring, colluding with Russian officials.
Do you know the basis of that information that you share with the Bureau? I mean, what was the nature of the evidence?
I think, Mr. Gowdy, this committee has now been provided information that relates to that issue in terms of information that the agency shared with the Bureau. And that is something that is appropriately classified.
All right. And you learned that when in this chronology did you learn of the contacts between these official members of the Trump campaign, or because
he knew of the contacts because he set up people. So he set up and framed George Papadopoulos, Carter Page, General Flynn. So he knew of the contacts. He set them up.
There's kind of a tripartite hierarchy. There's Trump himself, there are official members of the campaign, and then there are folks who represented themselves as being connected with him.
I'm not going to try to identify individuals nor try to parse it.
I don't want you to parse it. I just want you to identify the individuals. I don't want you to parse it.
I'm not going to identify the individuals because this is information that, again, is based on classified sources and intelligence.
He didn't want to identify the individuals because he was already setting them up. How could he have identified Carter Page or George Papadopoulos or what was going to happen to General Michael Flynn? He couldn't identify any of these people who were alleged to have ties with the Russians because he was setting them up along with Comey. I mean, the whole thing was absurd even when it started. In 2016, 2017, I said this is complete nonsense. You'd have to be a complete imbecile to believe any of it. But you had very highly educated, morally superior, wonderful human beings who were Democrats. A lot of great people believed it. And I'm being sincere. A lot of really good human beings believed it because they could not stand the cognitive dissonance of losing to Trump. They can't fathom the notion that they lost to Trump because they were so corrupt. They cheated Bernie Sanders politically. Politically, they were corrupt. Cheating Bernie Sanders, covering up the Clinton email probe fiasco with top secret intelligence onto servers. Brennan, Comey, nobody's explained how Clinton got top secret intel onto servers. It is impossible to do from a cybersecurity perspective. But let's continue.
Were they official members of the campaign?
I'm going to defer to current agency officials to be able to further provide to you information related to that. But my understanding is that this committee has access to the documents that we would have provided to the Bureau.
All right. Last question, because I'm out of time. We can use the word evidence. We both know what the other one's talking about. How did you test, probe, examine, cross-examine, otherwise test the reliability or believability, credibility of that evidence you uncovered?
I made sure that the components within CIA that have responsible for counterintelligence, cyber, and Russia were actively working to understand as much as possible about the reliability, accuracy of the information that they already collected and the information that was available that needed further corroboration.
But how could that be when the Clinton campaign in their own emails said, quote, we need to be elevating the Pied Piper candidates, Trump, Ted Cruz, and Ben Carson. The Clinton campaign literally wanted to elevate Trump. So how on earth could the Clinton campaign and the Russians have the same exact goal, objective? Here's a Politico article. The opponent they were most eager to face. They always wanted Trump. Inside Team Clinton's year-long struggle to find a strategy against the opponent they were most eager to face. This is backed up by their own writing. We need to be elevating Trump. It's right there. So how on earth is he saying that he did everything possible to find John O'Brien? I did everything possible to find the Russians were... It's like, well, the Clinton campaign wanted Trump. Are you trying to say that... were all these people trying to say that the Russians and the Clinton campaign both wanted the same candidate? Or did they fabricate everything? Oh, yes, they did once Trump won.
We'll come back to the next round.
Too much time expired. Mr. Himes, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Director.
Defense.
That's why I think as part of this effort, they were trying to drive a wedge between Europe and
those contacts might have been benign, might not have been, but they rose to the level of indicating that they need to be reviewed for their nature and looking into an investigation. Did I characterize that correctly?
Yes, but I don't want to take this out of context. You know, we see contacts and interactions between Russian officials and U.S. persons all the time. It is...
For example, during the Uranium One deal, money was millions went to the Clinton Foundation, and 20% of U.S. uranium capacity, according to the New York Times at that point, when they actually did investigative journalism, was given to Putin in Moscow. But again, that's a commodity. And Snopes said that Clinton didn't do it. It was President Obama who could have vetoed the sale, but of course that didn't happen. So, but money did go to the foundation from people directly linked to Putin. Other than that, these are benign contacts. Well, what really took place is that Russia and the Clinton campaign, as we've seen, wanted Trump.
Is when it's in the context that there's something else going on. And so we knew at the time that the Russians were involved in this effort to try to interfere in our election. So with that backdrop and increasing indications that they were involved in that, seeing these types of contacts and interactions during the same period of time raised my concern.
Excellent. I appreciate that qualification. But if someone left this hearing today and said that you had indicated that those contacts were evidence of collusion or collaboration, they would be misrepresenting your statements, correct?
They would have misheard my response to the very good questions that were asked of me. I'm trying to be as clear as possible in terms of what I know, what I assess, and what I can say.
The hilarious attempt at circumventing perjury while committing perjury is a sight to behold. It's so amusing, but that's the way... if you only knew what I knew, if you only knew you don't know, and we can't talk about it in this setting because, I know so much classified information. The average American couldn't handle it, but I know it, And so, anyway, the Russians wanted Trump. The CIA can't do it all on its own. We have to give it to Comey and all the other agents there who despise Trump. That'll help thrust the country into a new Cold War. And, every Democrat stubbed their toe. It's the Russians' fault. But we know now, he's going to be indicted. This is the public testimony. There was closed-door testimony. This is the public testimony 8 years ago. The closed-door testimony 2 years ago. You think he changed his answers? No. So these are almost certainly the same answers.
So you would say that's a misrepresentation of your statement, yes?
I would say that it was not an accurate portrayal of my statement. Absolutely,
Excellent.
It was inconsistent with my
So
remarks.
let me go to the next step.
How could I admit that if somebody had heard my testimony, they would come to the conclusion that Trump was working with Russia? Because obviously I made it all up. So why would anyone come to that conclusion if I made it all up and can't tell you I made it up during this testimony? So yes, I'm not saying that Trump worked with Russia, but I am kind of saying he did.
If someone saw what you saw, and only what you saw, with respect to those contacts, if they looked at the intelligence that you saw, where you said it might have been benign, might not have been benign, and then they characterize what they saw as having been evidence of collusion or collaboration, they'd be misrepresenting the intelligence, would they not?
I don't know what else they have seen that could corroborate or is correlated.
Only what you saw. They would be misrepresenting the intelligence, correct?
If they saw the Steele dossier purchased by Hillary Clinton, yes, they would know that it was Clinton's idea along with the DNC, and that me and that everyone, including Comey and Clapper, were in on it to try to set up and frame Trump and lie to the American public based on a dossier purchased by his direct rival to thwart and undermine his presidency and thrust the country into a new Red Scare McCarthy-era Cold War. All because Democrats couldn't accept the fact that they lost. Yes, if they saw the Steele dossier, we could come to that conclusion.
I presume they would be misrepresenting what it is that I saw. Again, I don't
Excellent.
know.
Thank you. I appreciate that, because I do believe that there are members of this committee that deserve that counsel, because your specificity gives us an understanding of what we're reviewing. And I do believe that there are those who review some of the information that you have seen and represent it to the public absolutely incorrectly and misrepresent it. And I'd like to yield the remainder of my time to Mr. Gowdy.
Sorry, I was colluding with my friend from Florida. And I want to pick up where, well, I want to do this. The last time you and I talked, you had referred information to the Bureau. Am I right? What you had seen, you referred to the Bureau.
Okay.
What?
I don't know if that was the last thing that we talked about, but I'll grant you that we talked about that, yes.
One of the last.
Yes.
It wasn't a trick question. One of the last things, you referred to the Bureau what you saw. Is that fair?
Yes.
Did you also refer to Director Clapper?
Not everything that was shared with the Bureau was shared with Director Clapper.
And why would that be?
Because on counterintelligence matters dealing with U.S. personal information of a very sensitive nature, the Office of the DNI and the DNI does not have that type of operational.
So now he's afraid in the future that Clapper would turn on him. So he says not everything was shared with the Director of National Intelligence, which is very bizarre. Very bizarre, even though Clapper was in that meeting and knew about the Steele dossier and was a part of setting up and framing Trump also.
Responsibility, and what we try to do is to make sure that there is as little exposure of that information as possible. I would keep General Clapper informed about the nature of my engagements, but the materials that were shared with the Bureau would not have been shared with the DNI.
Do you know if the Bureau opened a matter? Well, first of all, when was that? With as much specificity as you can give us, when did you refer that information to the Bureau?
Would you accept last year as the answer? It was during the summertime, and but even previous, there are ongoing sharing of information with the Bureau, and so it was over the course of the year.
All right. In conclusion, because I'm out of time, sometime in the summer, you shared the information with Director Comey at the Bureau.
Sometime in the summer, there was information that the CIA had that was shared with the Bureau, but it wasn't the only period of time where such information was shared with the Bureau.
Good enough. Thanks.
Jim yields back. Mr. Swalwell.
So the information was the dossier. the Steele dossier that Clinton purchased. This, interestingly enough, is Brennan 4 years later, but that was 8 years ago. This is 4 years ago right here. This is interesting. And he incriminates himself here. He's still promoting the lie within the statute of limitations. Actually, there's no statute of limitations for conspiracy, but check this out.
I think it's fair to say that the mutual contempt between you and Donald Trump is, I was trying to think of the right adjective yesterday, epic, profound. In fact, both of you have accused the other of treason, which raises the question, was it a mistake for you as the CIA director to come out so publicly and to attack a sitting president so sharply? And didn't you lend credence to President Trump's argument that there is a deep state in the intelligence community working against him?
Well, it's true. I'm a former senior intelligence official, but I have been a private citizen ever since I started to shoot back at Donald Trump because of his dishonesty, his deceit. And when he stood on the world stage in Helsinki and sided with Vladimir Putin against the U.S. intelligence community.
The U.S. intelligence community does not decide foreign policy. The president, elected by the people, decides what national security is and what a foreign policy is. That's why you had Obama coming in with a more favorable or less belligerent foreign policy towards Russia. Initially, they wanted a Russian reset. That's why Putin said Obama may ease Russian-U.S. relations. This is a 2008 article. It is not for the U.S. intelligence community or any department within the executive branch to tell the president what to do in terms of foreign policy. The people of the United States literally choose a different president. If they don't like the incumbent, they choose a different president, a new candidate, a new president. So they did not want President Obama's foreign policy anymore. They wanted President Trump's in 2016 and in 2024. It's not a former CIA director does not have the right to, or he has the right in terms of First Amendment, but he has no authority to condemn a president who was elected by the people. The people don't elect intelligence chiefs or the intelligence community. They elect a president to implement either the existing foreign policy or a new paradigm of foreign policy. This isn't rocket science.
Yes, I did say that his actions were nothing short of Helsinki and sided with Vladimir Putin against the U.S. intelligence community. Yes, I did say that his actions were nothing short of treasonous. And so, yes, I have been strident in my criticism.
And yet it wasn't treasonous when President Obama came in to ease Russia-U.S. relations in 2008. That wasn't treasonous. But it was treasonous for President Trump to have the same viewpoint. So this is after, by the way, Brennan and others set up and framed Trump with a dossier literally purchased by Clinton. I mean, again, the people who despise Trump don't care about facts or reason or logic pertaining to the fact he was an innocent man set up by Brennan and Comey and others.
Criticism of him, but his irresponsibility on so many fronts, including on COVID, has angered me and has led me to speak out as vociferously as I have.
One of the things that President Trump has gone after you about and has accused you and other officials of is perpetuating what he calls the Russia hoax. Here he is.
You can look at Brennan and Comey and Clapper, the whole group. We caught them spying on our campaign. This was an illegal act like no other illegal act. This was treason. This was at the highest level of treason.
As I said, you both accused each other of treason. What do you think of Attorney General Barr extending the Durham investigation into the Obama administration, the FBI, the intelligence community, extending that investigation well into 2021?
I think that is fine. I have no problems with it. I do believe.
But that's almost certainly why the indictment is imminent. It's basically already written. So the criminal charges are referred. He lied. We can see that he lied. numerous times here. This is Director of National Intelligence John Brennan lied and denied using the dossier, but he did so numerous times. Let's continue.
Believe that John Durham is going to carry out his responsibilities ably and hopefully not with any type of political influence. I sat down for 8 hours with John Durham and his team answering all his questions. And so looking back at 2016, were there some mistakes made in terms of the FISA applications, other types of things? Yes.
If John Brennan gave 8 hours of testimony under oath to Special Counsel John Durham, who deserves the Presidential Medal of Freedom for what he did. If Brennan gave 8 hours of testimony to Durham, I mean, I don't even know how many counts of perjury, false statements will be leveled against him, but it's probably a lot more than what Comey's facing at the moment.
Apparently there were, but that doesn't mean that there was criminal intent, and there was no spying on Donald Trump's campaign. And it's very clear from Robert Mueller's investigation that there were a lot of activities that I think were very unprincipled, unethical, and it'll be.
Mueller on page 13 or 18 of the Mueller probe said not only was there no evidence of collusion, there was no evidence of campaign finance violations. So Clinton paid a Federal Election Commission fine for the Steele dossier, literally compiled by foreign sources. Steele is a foreign, even though he's a citizen of an ally. Okay, our greatest ally, you could say. But still, the Clinton campaign and Democrats used foreign operatives to interfere in 2016 with the Steele dossier.
Be up to individuals in the future to determine whether or not there was any criminal activity that took place during that time.
But let me pick up on the Mueller investigation because it concluded in the long Mueller report that it did not find sufficient evidence that the Trump campaign either conspired or coordinated with the Russian government during the 2016 election. Do you accept that conclusion?
Here's why your knee pain.
Yes, I do, that Bob Mueller was not able to establish that evidence of a criminal conspiracy. But it's clear from his report about the number of contacts that took place.
There were contacts during Uranium One also. That almost certainly was a criminal conspiracy. But there was no criminal conspiracy between Trump and anyone else. The conspiracy was against Trump by people who conspired against him, breaking the law. And so the conspiracy statutes will be leveled against a whole bunch of people. Right now we're dealing with perjury. If you look at the House Judiciary Committee, just an hour ago, 2 hours ago, referred John Brennan for criminal prosecution, making false statements before Congress, knowingly made false statements. So now the intent, well, perjury requires intentionally misleading, but the false statement is just a false statement. Intentional false statement here. So numerous willfully and intentionally false statements. So he had 8 hours of the same nonsense that you heard. Okay, this isn't like Comey can try to kind of slither out of the McCabe thing, but there will be future indictments as well for Comey. With Brennan, it's similar to Bolton. Brennan's indictments will be similar to John Bolton's indictments in how clear-cut they are.
Between the Trump campaign and Russians and Russian officials. And none of them were referred to the FBI. And so I think it is quite evident and clear that there was extensive interaction that should not have happened. And that is why the FBI was investigating, as it should have, the nature of those contacts and whether anybody was in fact conspiring with the Russians to try to affect.
But that's a lie, too, because the contacts he's referring to were set up and framed by the same people who investigated the contacts. Carter Page was set up. George Papadopoulos was set up. Actually, exculpatory evidence was withheld from both Carter Page, George Papadopoulos, and General Michael Flynn. They withheld evidence that would exonerate them. They wanted to ruin people. But it didn't work out. Trump moved his head, thank God. Thank God. that Trump moved his head, and a firefighter lost his life defending his family in Butler, Pennsylvania. You think that Brennan, 4 years ago, imagined that Trump would win again? No, that's why 8 hours of testimony is almost certainly filled with endless lies.
The outcome of the 2016 election.
You talked about the FISA warrant to surveil Carter Page, and the Inspector General for the FBI said that was improper. The lawyer who took actually some statements from the CIA and doctored them has pled guilty to a crime. What about what seems to be the pretty total discrediting of the Steele dossier?
Well, as we have said previously, the Steele dossier was not used in any way to undergird the judgments that came out of the intelligence community.
Not only did it undergird, it undergirded beyond belief. The Steele dossier was the main undergirdment. Okay? It not only undergirded everything, it was the undergird that served as the fuel for everything. That's why he denied using the dossier. That's the reason that the dossier was given to Trump by Comey. I mean, you couldn't make this up. It's so obvious, and it was so obvious back then, but people wanted to believe it. Really good people, wonderful human beings believed John Brennan. What was the alternative? That Trump defeated them? That everything they stood for politically, President Trump just defeated? No, they weren't going to allow that. So they just allowed an innocent man. Donald Trump was an innocent man. He was set up and framed by a lot of people.
Assessment about the Russian actions in the 2016 election. And so the Steele dossier was something that I never, looked at from a standpoint of credibility, because it wasn't something that the CIA had acquired. And so I think, people point to the Steele dossier as this, reason why the whole thing was a hoax. No, there was so much other evidence.
There was zero other evidence. None of it was the dossier was literally John Brennan lied and denied using the dossier because he knew it was discredited. Brennan refused to remove it. Yes, but doesn't it ring true, he said. When confronted with the dossier's flaws, Brennan said, yes, but doesn't it ring true? It was literally part of the intelligence community assessment. Brennan overruled senior CIA officers who challenged the IC's claim. He ordered the inclusion of substandard reporting. You can't just hide behind bureaucracy, because bureaucracy is now run by the same people who are investigating Brennan. Okay, that's why he is being referred to here. Were you aware of the FBI's involvement with the dossier? Asked Gates, to which Brennan replied, yes, because there's an annex in the intelligence community assessment that the Bureau asked to be included there. It was their purview. Yeah, right. So he literally put it in the intelligence community assessment. As the Federalist Brianna Lyman previously summarized, two senior CIA officials contended that the dossier should have been omitted from the ICA. Yes, but doesn't it ring true? And if you want to read my writing in the Federalist, it's just type in H.A. Goodman Federalist. You can see the times I've been published there. Very honored to have been published there. But this is all, check this out.
Project founder, President Mike Davis. Mike, it's great to see you. So when Justice Jackson, when she was first nominated, there was a lot of criticism.
Like Barry. Honest people. So whatever happens, happens.
But Brennan, well, he thinks that Trump needs to just let it go. Listen.
Move on, get over it. But clearly Donald Trump, believes that this is something that I think.
Why would you move on if somebody tried to set up and frame and destroy you with a dossier purchased by your direct political rival? How could you just move on, just forget it? Oh, okay. Imagine if a dossier was written about Brennan. that he was in a Moscow hotel room enjoying a certain type of activity.
It continues to need to be looked at and criticized. But again, I stand behind the assessment.
So, Mike, we're still learning the.
Mike Davis is awesome. There's a lot of great people involved in all of this. Mike Davis is one of them. John Solomon is a really wonderful journalist. There's a whole bunch of people. Let's continue.
The details of the full scope of the criminal investigation, but Fox reported that two sources described the FBI's view of the duo's interactions as conspiracy, which could open up a wide range of potential prosecutorial options. What would that conspiracy be, and what does that mean for Brennan and Comey?
I've been saying this for years, going back to the Mar-a-Lago raid, the unprecedented, unnecessary, and unlawful raid on the office of former President Trump for presidential records he's allowed to have under the Presidential Records Act. You had the Obama White House, President Obama, Vice President Biden, the Attorney General, the FBI Director Comey, the CIA Director Brennan, and many others. They made up the Russian collusion hoax against President Trump. They got an illegal spy warrant on him by lying to the FISA court. They continued to spy on him when President Trump was the president of the United States. This is an obvious criminal conspiracy against rights under 18 USC Section 241. And I would say to Mr. Brennan, nobody's above the law, so you better lawyer up, buddy.
Mike, I want to switch topics for a moment because Biden's former doctor, Kevin O'Connor, decided to plead the fifth rather than answer questions about the former president's mental fitness at the time that he was in the White House. A lot of people have questions about who was running this country. To me, I would say if he was completely fit, then you could just sit there and say that. If you're pleading the fifth, you have something to hide.
Yeah, he definitely has something to hide because even as a doctor with a doctor-patient relationship where you can have confidential communications, even with a doctor with a patient, you're not violating HIPAA by answering some of these questions. This guy basically gave his name and would not answer essentially any other question, pleading the Fifth Amendment.
So, ladies and gentlemen, they wanted President Trump. The Clinton campaign wanted President Trump, okay? This is an article in ABC News, okay? They wanted President Trump. They wanted to elevate Trump. It's within their own writing, all right? Very difficult for now, Brennan, with the reality that in Politico, they always wanted Trump. It's very difficult for Brennan to then say, oh, well, we were looking at the Russians. And of course, the dossier was the primary reason. It was pretty much the only reason because they didn't find any evidence. In fact, they did everything possible to ignore evidence, which was what you heard a million times from Brennan under oath. How could the Russians and the Clinton campaign both wanted Trump? And then, of course, Clinton's campaign and the Democrats changed their tune right after they lost because they fabricated everything. Anyway, hit subscribe to this channel, ladies and gentlemen. To my super chat, thank you. This was huge, and it's happening, ladies and gentlemen. I told you it's going to happen. The indictments are probably going to take place within the next week, 2 weeks, officially, but they've been essentially already written. Hit subscribe. Go to H.A. Goodman's other channel right now. I'm building that channel. Go to that channel. We'll have a synopsis of this. And there is already a segment on there about Brennan and the indictment. Hit subscribe. Go to H.A. Goodman's other channel right now. Thanks, everybody.